Adam and Amanda Popp, welcome to the show. It's exciting to have you here and hear about your story, your journey, the home journey that you've been on, and from your personal story all the way through to being a recipient of a Homes for Our Troops home. And so excited to have you on the show today.
Yeah, excited to be here, and thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So when I read about you, it's a very amazing and inspiring story. And there's all these accolades that you have, 12-year United States Air Force EOD specialist, and I'm not even doing that justice for what you did. Mm-hmm. And so I know that, you've gone through a journey. You became a para-athlete, and you have 11 Guinness Book of World Records. You have other world records that, for what you compete in. And also you've been driven and really inspired to help other people achieve the things in their life. And so like through your coaching, your mentoring, tell me your story, Adam.
Yeah, there's a lot there, and only 7 Guinness Book of
Only
World
7?
That's right now. So
okay.
He keeps improving on the ones he has, so it depends on how you count. Bro.
Yeah. I mean, for me, that drive to help others, as you said, is a result of having a lot of help through my journey and struggle. So, looking back, if you want the high level full story, I grew up in a really small town near Louisville, Kentucky, 450 people. Didn't have much diverse experience living there. But when I joined the military at 18, I ended up in Japan and was super homesick for the first 6 months, but had a lot of people, supervisors and other people in the military early in my career there that helped me thrive in that environment. And throughout my life, that's been a really common occurrence of having people who support and help in those times of need to help me thrive in those situations. And I've just seen that time and time again, that eventually, like when I felt in a good place to help others, then that's kind of where that drive came from, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So, 18, I was in Japan, spent the next 8 years living overseas between Japan and Korea and Turkey, and working in a lot of other countries. And then in 2004 was the first time I deployed and went to Baghdad, Iraq. And as you mentioned, doing the EOD mission there, which is disarming roadside bombs mainly, but also working to disarm and defuse other explosive devices in that environment. So weapons caches and other explosive hazards, and just really removing those from the battlefield to make the local population safe, or having freedom of movement for the military members I worked with to be able to drive on the roads. And I did that for 6 months in Baghdad. And as how old was I? 25-year-old kid at the time, I would say. It was a very overwhelming experience. And
before you jump to more of the story, why did you join the Air Force?
Yeah, I joined the Air Force mainly. It's kind of a funny story, but it was 1997. I didn't, there was no call. It was prior to 2000 to September 11th, 2001. So it was prior to that. But I had conversations with several family members who were in the military. My grandfather was in the military. His brother and dad were also in the military. One in World War I, one in World War II. And then I also had a cousin in the Air Force and a cousin who was married to a soldier. So I had all these people in my family that had military experience, and the common theme was, military is great, and choose the Air Force.
And choose the Air Force. Awesome.
So I chose the Air Force, but as an EOD tech, as you mentioned, disarming bombs. And when I took the paper home from my recruiter that kind of explained the job and gave it to my mom, they were like talking about weapons of mass destruction and nuclear weapons. And my mom was like, she called my cousin who talked me into this.
Oh no.
Going to the Air Force. And I was like, what did you get him into?
Yeah.
And then unbeknownst to me at the time, he told her, EOD is a really hard career field. It's the school's really hard. He'll probably fail out and he'll go do something else. So just don't worry about it.
So she was praying that you'd fail out of EOD school.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. So I didn't. And
Yeah. You enjoyed it.
Yeah, I loved it. It's one of the best, group of guys and women to ever work with, and just really left a lasting impression on, me post-military service.
That's a pretty highly intensive area to work in. Mm-hmm. The thought, the skill, the forethought. I mean, that's an amazing and critical job, but scary as heck.
Yeah. And it's, flash forward to what I do now. It's there's a lot of mental skills and strength that go into that job that have carried me through to current life. So
yeah,
I'm sure we'll get into that at one point. But it's it's stressful, and like I said, as a kid, trying to work with that and block a lot of things out, it's helps you develop.
Yeah, compartmentalize some of that stuff.
Right. Totally.
Yeah. You're 25 years old. You're back in Baghdad, and you're serving, doing the EOD. Mm. So tell me from there. Continue your journey.
Yeah, so I did 6 months there in Baghdad with my team of 14 people. It was a very busy time. It was the end of 2004 and beginning of 2005. During that time, they had their first election there. So that was a really intense day from my memory of just, attacks and attacking the polling station and people who were resistive to this change, just doing anything in their power to create chaos. So it was a pretty busy time, and I learned a lot in that 6 months. And then after I got back, I was stationed in Japan at the time. And then from that time I got back in 2005, like June 2005, I deployed again in August of 2007 to Afghanistan.
Okay.
To do that same mission, but in, a different environment.
Mm-hmm. And so how many years have you been in the military up to that point?
So 2007, I had 10 years in.
Mm-hmm. Were you hoping to go 20 years and retire?
Yeah, I was at that tipping point, right? So it was the halfway point of my service. And during that deployment, I had like 6 or 8 months left on my enlistment. And I started to look just to see what else was out there and giving myself opportunities to potentially leave the military if that came up. Mm-hmm. And so I was applying for jobs during that deployment. And then we can...
Yeah. And then tell me what happened on this deployment.
Yeah, so again, doing that same EOD mission where disarming roadside bombs and other explosive hazards. And then on December 7th, 2007, I was working on a device, and there was a secondary device that I didn't know about, and it ended up exploding. Basically, I was right on top of it, on my hands and knees, exploding. And then next thing I know, I'm on my back, and I was injured badly. I didn't know really what was going on, but my team member, Air Force guy, was there within seconds, like trying to save my life, basically.
Yeah.
And then some Army medics came in, and they were just doing everything they could to stabilize me, and then prepare me for my journey to the first hospital in Afghanistan. And then from there, I was put under, and then woke up in Germany several hours later, and just completely shocked, I guess, overwhelmed with what was going on.
Is that when you realized something went wrong?
Well, no,
in Germany?
No, I realized then. Like, I was awake through the whole thing in Afghanistan.
Did you have one of the big EOD suits on? And
fortunately, I did. We don't typically wear that in combat, but the situation kind of, we use the safest means possible when doing our job, and that's typically remote and robot, which we did. And then, I had to go down in this kind of precarious situation where it was this bomb was like in a really tight situation. So I was wearing that suit because our robot couldn't get to it. And luckily that's really what saved my life.
So you knew something happened. You wake up in Germany, mm-hmm. in a hospital, mm-hmm. and you don't know prognosis.
Yeah, I mean, there is when I found out, I didn't have a leg, and my arm was bandaged, and I didn't know full prognosis for sure. I didn't know what was next, right? I was like really overwhelmed with thinking about what was next.
What did you think? Like, what were your first thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, my first thoughts were, well, I'm glad I'm alive, and like, how do you go on from here? Like, what's like, there's just so many unknowns for, thinking about prior to deployment. You think about the consequences that can happen, and usually that's dying in combat.
Yeah.
But oftentimes, at least for me, I didn't think, you could lose a limb and have to recover from that. I never really thought about that. So those laying in that hospital bed after it happened was the first time I'm trying to like process that and figure out what was next. And, then you're reflecting on like, well, what happened, second guessing yourself, and all these different thoughts that are really overwhelming, not to mention that, the traumatic event that you experience is still fresh in your mind, and like trying to like sleep and pain and all these other things. And it's just a lot. Oh, it's overwhelming.
You've probably categorized into some phases your recovery, healing. How would you describe from that day in Germany to 5 years later?
Yeah, I mean, from that day, those first few years, I like to break it down. You put it, it's a nice way that you put that. And I like to break it down as like physical recovery, right? It's physical recovery, it's psychological recovery. And then eventually you get to this process of the physical recovery is pretty much over.
How long did that take?
It took, I spent about a year and a half at the hospital.
Yeah.
And, a lot of those surgeries, it was about 2 months of surgeries early on. I was in the hospital from December 7th when I got hurt to mid-February. And those early weeks and months were just like 2 or 3 surgeries a week for about the first month or so. And then, another month or so inpatient. And then the next year was basically getting my muscles strong, wearing a prosthetic, trying to like relearn to walk again. And basically get back to a baseline level of functioning where, I was walking and doing activities of daily living, and just being able to really like support myself once I left that hospital environment with all these, caregivers helping you with all those things, and being able to be self-sufficient once leaving.
So the physical, and then
the psychological was like the next step right after leaving the hospital. And it's, I found out, I kind of put the pieces together years later, but it's, transitioning out of the military is hard enough for most individuals. Leaving a job that you've done for, 30, 40, 50 years, when you're retiring and leaving that job, it's hard enough for people who retire. Leaving the sport, we just had the Olympics. You work your whole life to get to that point. You compete at the Olympics, and then you leave that. It's hard enough. It's and that's a similar experience for leaving the hospital or leaving the military for me. And what I found years later is like, I had this clearly defined sense of purpose that the military gave me. Providing this this service to the people around me and the people in the countries I worked in, and it's so clearly defined. And then it's those people I worked with, building those deep relationships, and having this like deep sense of trust with people who you deploy to these environments with, and you spend every day with them, and you have their back, they have your back, no matter what's going on. And you lose that when I got out. And you lose that sense of purpose, and you lose this ability to like do something cool and share that cool story. And you leave, and that's not given to you anymore. You have to like find it out for yourself. And that next 5 or 6 years was that process of me finding it out, finding those things again through a lot of ups and downs, and really trying to put the pieces together. And that's like the psychological recovery portion, as I mentioned.
During that portion, the psychological recovery, what was a catalyst that kept you moving forward?
The catalyst was trying to find those things again, unbeknownst to me. But after I left, I was like trying to find those things again, right? So I worked for a defense company, and it's like a very natural progression or step. You're back working with mostly retired military members. And I was working for this defense company, and I ended up going back to Afghanistan with them. So it's like trying to find those things again. But but yeah, it wasn't the same.
Yeah.
So I was back in Afghanistan about a year and a half after I left the hospital, left the military.
Oh, wow.
As a civilian, doing a civilian job for the military.
Wow. So you're psychological, and then what's after that phase?
Yeah, it's trying to thrive physically and psychologically, right? And that's kind of the phase I've been in for hopefully the past 8 years, and it's 8 or 9 years, and it's continuing to be curious and try to grow and be physically active, be psychologically engaged and understanding and curious there as well.
You can't really separate your physical strengths that you went after and your psychological strengths, but physically, what inspired you to really drive and push yourself in running?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so again, it goes back to the people and organizations I mentioned earlier who are there for you in those different phases. And for me, I was participating, maybe I'll use that term loosely, participating in some like bike rides and some very like intro level sports. And even at the hospital, there was organizations that would take you out to ski and try to learn, again, these things that I did before I lost my leg, and trying to bring a sense of normalcy and, basically that like baseline level of functioning that the person you were before your injury, that you can be again.
Yeah.
So skiing and bike riding and, all these other events that they would take you on at the hospital, to scuba diving, to try to learn and be able to do it without, the use of, with the use of a prosthetic or without your leg. So that's kind of what prompted it early on. And then I started doing this relay race with an organization. And long story short, that's kind of what prompted me to get into running. So it's a multi-event relay race that involves canoeing and cycling and skiing and bike riding. And we put a team together, and I was mainly...
What would you call that event? I mean, it's not like an Ironman, it's swimming, running, and biking.
Yeah, it's called Ski to Sea. It's
Ski to Sea.
Yeah, so you start at the top of Mount Baker, and then you like ski and run and mountain bike or road bike, canoe, mountain bike, kayak to the ocean. So you're skiing to the ocean. And it's a very unique event, but we took a military team there, combat wounded military team there, for several years. And I was always the canoe guy because I wasn't super active. I wasn't running. I wasn't like cycling. Yeah. And I would like canoe. I could do that. You like just get in the stream of the river, and the river takes you. And it's pretty easy, except for I was canoeing the first year with a guy who was completely blind. We tipped the canoe like 30 minutes in.
Oh, wow. Didn't make it easy.
No. And then the second year, I was canoeing with a guy who lost his arm, same guy, EOD guy. Yeah. And his prosthetic kept falling off, so he's like, couldn't canoe. And I'm like, so after that, I was like, all right, I got to find something else. So on that third year, that's kind of when I took up trying to run.
There you go.
So it was a long process to get there, both through all those, like I said, organizations and trying different things out, but also mainly the psychological hurdles I was self-imposing on myself.
Yeah.
And
so self-imposing on yourself. You were putting those hurdles before you.
That's right. That's exactly right.
It wasn't your situation.
It wasn't physical by
anybody else. It was you.
That's right.
And so it's overcoming those hurdles.
Yeah, that's right. And that's kind of what I alluded to earlier, was that learning process of trying to put those things in place that I lost through transitioning out of the military.
Yeah.
And transitioning from a person with an able-bodied person with 2 legs to an individual who, was wearing a prosthetic and had a disability. So it's a very, for me personally, like a long transition of trying to understand and come to terms with that.
Yeah.
So again, self-imposed psychological like hurdles I was putting on myself.
Wow. That's amazing. Amanda, when did you come into the picture?
Well, she should tell her.
Thriving phase.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. 8 years, thriving. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, we met in 2018. When I was, we were both living in like the Virginia, DC area, which is, I grew up in Virginia, so it was back home after spending quite a bit of time abroad as well. So we really connected on that. But I was a Peace Corps volunteer in West Africa, and then lived abroad, mostly in Central America for several years, doing international development work, and then had come back home and started my own business and moved closer to my family for the support. And that's where we met. And he was running at the time, I was running, so we really connected.
So you met him as he was starting out on his thrive, gotten over the hurdles.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is good for all of us.
Yeah. Because I'm sure those were some hard, dark times, before that. And so no, it's awesome to have you here. And, so since he started thriving post, his injury, finding there are no hurdles anymore, tell me what kind of person Adam has become.
Not boring at all.
Yeah.
I know his endeavors and goals have taken us many places as a family, which as our family has grown has been really fun to do, all of us together. We have a son now who'll be 2 in October, and we have a daughter who's due in just a couple of months. But yeah, no, it's been really fun to see. I mean, even the past couple of years to see what he's done, and the new goals that he's taken on. And I think that Adam would also say that it's taken the whole family to get there with some of them. But yeah, no, we all are very proud of him.
Yeah. We're proud of you, Adam.
No, thanks.
He hates that kind of language.
Yeah. You go through this journey, and we got to know you because we get to build a home for you guys through the Homes for Our Troop organization, which is a phenomenal organization we'll talk about more in a minute. But so during this Thrive time that now, Adam's starting to really start competing, right? Doing the Boston Marathon. Tell me about your 7 Guinness Book of World Records and why.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. Reflecting back to April 15th, 2015 is when I picked up a running prosthetic from my prosthetist and started trying this out. Yeah. And at that moment in time, it didn't have anything to do about goals, or, I mean, I guess it did have to do with goals, but nothing, no marathons, there was no expectation, which made it a lot of fun and really easy. But once I started that process and realized I could do that and it wasn't taken away from me like I thought it was for so many years, then it became more about like, what's next? If I can do this, what else is out there that I thought I couldn't do for 7 years? And that's kind of what led to just trying new things out and
new challenges, keeping something in front of you to shoot towards.
Yeah, that's right. And, I just worked up from literally sitting on the couch for 7 years to completing that running portion of that relay race that I mentioned.
Yeah. I think it's on your website, that little video you have, and it kind of goes through your story a little bit. Right. And you see, like, you're not the fit guy you are now.
Right.
Not that you're, chubby, but I mean, you're like uber fit right now.
Yeah.
And so, and you're getting ready to do what event?
So
in October?
Oh, well.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, we'll get there eventually.
Okay. Not yet?
I want to know.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, just to your point, those big goals really didn't come till much later. And I finished like 3rd or 4th to last in that relay portion of that race that I did. And, but something just hooked me about running. And, I just fell in love with it and was literally out there, 5 days a week trying this out and seeing progress and seeing a lot of like, you made a link to that mind-body connection earlier, and I was seeing a lot of improvements in all areas of my life. It wasn't just running, but it was, going back to school and the relationship building and those things that I thought, again, that I lost for so long, that I was finding through this running community, through these other communities, and really just starting to put the pieces back together at that moment. And once I started to see success in running, I started to really pursue it persistently. And within 5 months of starting to run, I did a half marathon and ran faster with a prosthetic than I had ran with 2 legs. So I was like,
oh, wow.
Like how, how, lame was I before that I,
Yeah. You didn't think you could do this.
Right.
And now
within 5 months, I'm like
you're
better
beating-
than what I was before I left.
you're beating your old self.
That's right.
That's
right.
pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So that's cool. So, and you're a runner too, right? Isn't that what you shared earlier, that you guys?
Yeah, we really connected on running initially, and I love to run.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
That's awesome. Do you guys still go together?
Yeah.
Well, not 7 months pregnant, but yeah.
She'd surprise you.
Yeah.
I tried last week and
Yeah.
paid for it. No.
We enjoyed the activity of running together, but I think more importantly, especially early on, was our chats during those runs and what values we shared. Because running was one thing, but the things that were important to Amanda were also very important to me at that time, and we connected through running, but more importantly, connected through what those values we shared.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I think the idea of pushing yourself and challenge and what personal growth comes out of that.
I mean, seeing him, he pushes me to be like, all right, just, knowing your story. So living with him probably drives you crazy sometimes, right?
Exhausting.
It's horrible.
at times.
No.
No, it's a lot of fun.